Twilight. My problem with Twilight is it's sort of vampires with a chastity belt. Because if vampires are all about sex, Twilight is sort of the blue ball vampire. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You know, that's like I've got a superpower with no powers. You know, a superhero with no powers. It's like, we call that a cop. Why don't you just make a cop drama? You know? If you just want to make a soap opera, make a soap opera. But let me get this straight. This guy's young. He turns into a vampire, which means he's immortal. He's young, so he's got hormones. He can basically do whatever he wants, and he decides not to have sex. I'm sort of confused. I'm not buying that. And I wouldn't even buy that if it was a chick. You know, I think the chick would be like, "You mean I get to live forever and do what I want? I'm taking him." You know, you know, whatever Lola wants, Lola gets, and little man Lola wants you. Come on. That's my problem with Twilight. I haven't read the books. I haven't seen the movie. It's good that I haven't seen it, or yeah, I'd be offended. I don't know. It's hard to offend me. I just get bored, and after a while it just seems silly. I'm like, okay, if the whole archetype is about sort of sexy stuff, and then no one has sex, and someone said that like when the sunlight hits them, they don't burn up, they just twinkle. And somebody says, great, they're not vampires, they're fairies. Right? Okay, then great, that's awesome, make a fairy book. But get your damn mythological characters right, you know, and stop mixing them up. You know, fairies are not vampires, and vice versa. So that's the thing. If you're gonna tweak the thing, you know, it's interesting. I was just listening. My iPod is filled with lectures. I'm just an information junkie, and I have these fantastic sort of college-level lectures on all sorts of things, whether it's comparative mythology or whatnot. There's this wonderful series of lectures, if you can get your hands on it. It was produced by Barnes & Noble. They don't make them anymore, but it's called the Portable Professor Series, and it's a lecture series on modern fantasy literature, and it's called Of Sorcerers and Men. And this guy breaks down all the cool stuff about fantasy literature, and specifically, most of it is dedicated obviously to Tolkien and The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And it turns out that what Tolkien was doing when he was creating his stories is he was solving linguistic problems in Anglo-Saxon scholarship. So here are these guys reading Beowulf, and they're reading all these old Anglo-Saxon poems, and they've got all these written in the written and the written, you know, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I mean, obviously they're able to translate the words, but sometimes they'll have lists of creatures, like Alfin and Ulfin, and so like, okay, that's an elf, and that's a dwarf, we know what that, and that's a goblin, and then this word will come along, like Ent. They don't know what the hell an Ent is, right? And no one's been able to figure it out. And so what Tolkien would do is he would take these words in scholarship that they hadn't figured out, and he would try to come up with creative literary ways to solve it. And so Ent, the word Ent was in a list of creatures that was including giants and big things, ogres and trolls. And it's just like, okay, what if we made a big thing, but it was a big tree, and we'll call it an Ent, and that's where Treebeard comes from. And the idea that Bjorn, the word Bjorn means bear, and for those of you who've seen the Golden Compass, you know, the Panzerbjorn are the armored bears. Well, the problem is that in sort of northern Viking, Anglo-Saxon stuff, you're not supposed to say the word bear because the bear comes to your home, right, and eats you. Bad idea. So it's sort of like, you know, the evil eye. You never want to say the name of the creature who's going to come get you, right? So you don't say Bjorn, you say Sweetfoot. Or you say the wolf of the bees, because he eats honey, right? Which is what Beowulf means, the wolf of the bees. So Beowulf is a bear-like person, a berserker, a berserker. But you can't say bear. So Tolkien said, well, let me make a character called Bjorn who is like that. He's a berserker, he can go berserk, but literally he changes into a bear. He's a skin changer, and he can shapeshift into a bear. So Tolkien was going through and solving all these sort of interesting linguistic and philological problems in ancient scholarship and making up new characters. Fantastic! I'm all for recombining stuff and coming up with good stuff. But making vampires fairies seems silly. Because, you know, do they have pointed ears now? And, you know, because Tolkien did really Numenor, the Numenorians, where Aragorn, Strider, his whole lineage, was the second age of Middle-earth in the Silmarillion, and it turns out it has a lot of parallels with Atlantis. And actually, when Tolkien was making up the name, he realized that the phonemes he was using turned out to be Atlante, which is very close to Atlantis. totally coincidental, but cool stuff, you know, sure. Rewrite the history of Atlantis, do something new and interesting with it. That's always my thing. If you're gonna break the rules, be brilliant. Otherwise, don't break the rules. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry. Some of my favorite episodes from Slayers. Well, one of them is, one of my favorite episodes is the one, is it called Lie to Me? The one at the very end where Giles is saying saying Buffy, everything's fine, don't worry. Oh, there's that. Oh, I was not thinking the Slayer, Buffy. Oh, in Slayers, my favorite episode in Slayers. I do like the one where we have to dress up, and the Zelda Bunny one's pretty funny. The one where I have to cross-dress is pretty funny. I'm Moon. And then there's one where we're dressed, I don't think it's the Zelda Bunny stuff, but we're dressed sort of in costumes, and Zella's asleep, and Lena has to come and wake him up, and he's sitting there just mumbling to himself, and we didn't have a translation, but there was lip flap, and they're like, well, just do something, like, come here, cutie, and we're like, ah, and I was like, yeah, that's good, I like that one. So yeah, that's a good episode. I also like it when they use Zell as the anchor, as the boat anchor. That one's pretty good. That one's pretty good. Yeah, beat up on Zell. Yes. What did I like? What? Oh, the lie to there was something. There was something really poignant about that episode. I don't even remember the plot of the episode that much. But that last scene, they're standing in the graveyard, and Buffy's like, "It's like this, isn't it? You know, tell me it gets better." And Giles says, "No, it doesn't get better." And she goes, "No, come on, lie to me, tell me." And Giles goes, "All right, it does. It gets better. Everything's wonderful, and everything works out when you become an adult, and everything becomes easier." And then it cuts to black, and they just have like the executive producer name, and then Buffy just says really quietly, "Liar." And I was like, "Oh, that's really sad and poignant." And also the one where the rough one with Giles' girlfriend. Yeah, that with the Puccini opera playing and the rose petals and that's when I saw that episode I was like, oh, this is good. It's like my friend back before there was the interwebs. We had to talk about shows that we saw as a kid and just remember them because they didn't exist on videotape and you couldn't find out a website about them. And so in the early 90s, I was talking to a friend of mine about Robotech. And again, there was no way to know about Robotech. You had to just go off your own memory. And so I said, "Do you remember this show called Robotech?" And he's like, "Oh God, I love Robotech." He said, "That was the only series that made me upset." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, remember when the Roy Fokker character dies in the show?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "That really tore me up because I really cared about Roy Fokker, and as a child I was really upset about that." And he said, "But the next thought in my head was, isn't this so cool that I care so much about this character that it upsets me?" And that's the same thing I get when Joss does his writing, is that although I would disagree with him about some of the stuff he did in the Serenity movie, but the fact that stuff is at stake, that it is possible at any time that we could lose someone in the story, and that has repercussions. They're not just cannon fodder, they're not just red shirts, you know? If we lose this person, it matters. And we lose this person for a story reason. This is going to change something in the story as it goes on. It's important that Obi-Wan gets cut down, and Obi-Wan knows that too. And so that sort of thing is important. And when you try to lobotomize it, it gets sort of tiresome and flimsy. And then you go, this has no resonance. It starts to lose its meaning if there are no consequences. Right. Yeah. No, I think Joss is pretty ballsy about that, and I really appreciate that. I'm trying to think who else does that a lot. That's slipping my head.